Bassai.
The history, like most of these katas, goes back to China. And it seems it's a lost kata now in China. Choki Motobu said the three most practiced katas in Okinawa were Naihanchi, Kushanku and Bassai, but Bassai is now extinct in China. These are Motobu's own words. It seems our old friend Matsumura was involved. It's not saying that Matsumura brought it to Okinawa, but he certainly helped to spread it in Okinawa. And it was Matsumura who taught Itosu, and Itosu who eventually created the Pinan katas. Versions of Bassai, I gave up counting when I got to 23. I'm sure there are more, but 23 was enough. And there is a Matsumura no Bassai, and there is a Motobu no Bassai. So these two legendary figures in karate history both have a version of Bassai that people perform with their own name. Funakoshi, his interpretation, as Sensei mentioned, was like the storming of the castle or the impenetrable fortress, and attacking from multiple angles to keep the defenders busy until you can find the spot you want to attack. But the Chinese names are a little bit more towards Kung Fu. In the southern regions of China, it's called Pat Sai, and that interprets as lion dance. There's a traditional that you see in the New Year's festivals where the long chain of people, and the kata is said to resemble elements of the lion dance. In another province, it's called Bassai, which translates as leopard lion, because it's said to contain leopard-style Kung Fu and lion-style Kung Fu, elements of both. But as Motobu said, this is now lost in China. It's not practiced at all. There's no remnants of it or anything that looks vaguely like it. So again, an interesting kata and a piece of history that hopefully has been preserved. And maybe one of the 23 versions is the one closest to the original Chinese. Who knows? Welcome to this section of the kata. This time we're looking at Bassai. As usual, we'll have a look at the history of the kata, go through where it came from, and some interpretations of its name and origins. We'll look a little bit deeper into deciphering katas. So as part of the key points for this kata is we've looked previously about turns, but there is other elements within this kata that we can use to decipher and get a little bit more meaning from it. The second key point is transferable skills. So skills you've learnt in one kata, you now bring into this. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time. And once you start putting the dots together, it can improve your training because you've got this arsenal of ideas that you can call on. The third one I want to call pretty versus practical. Performing your kata as if you were in a competition is the pretty, then adapting that so it becomes practical. So if you're using this for real, you get the most out of your training. So we will do the key points slightly out of sync. I think it makes more sense if we look at the transferable skills first. It was something Sensei mentioned during the Seishan kata about the move to the side, and the kata itself generally just moves behind the block. But Sensei added this Mio today, the two-handed block. So if you've learnt this previously in your pinans, so maybe in Pinan Sandan, then you would transfer that to Pinan Godan. So by the time you got to Seishan, that would be a well-embedded technique of this double-handed block. And that's going to feature a lot when we talk about the deciphering of this kata. So this Mio today, this double-handed block, it changes things a lot if you really get to grips with it. And the other transferable skill was, again, Sensei did in Naihanchi and Kushanku, with finding out the cone of your peripheral vision. That's too big. I can't see Simon. But if I come back slightly, I can now see him. So we're establishing the cone of vision. And this again in the deciphering of the kata, at the beginning, that's going to play quite a big part in that. So back to key point number one, deciphering the kata and using transferable skills. Imagine we've got two opponents. We've got one here, one here. The last thing I want to do in a real situation is have them outside of my cone of vision. I could barely see Simon. If there was another attacker there, I could barely see him. I certainly don't want to, what the kata almost implies, is I have one in front of me and one behind me where I can't see at all. So going back to Kushanku and Naihanchi, if I've got two attackers, I want them within that cone of vision. So whichever one is likely to become the most dangerous, then I can take the view, that's the one to deal with. So if Simon now does the attack, he's now being the threat, he's coming in, I can move in and get rid of him, and this gives me a chance to take on the other guy. All I've done is buy myself some time. I know he's going to come back, but I've just cleared him out the way enough to buy some time to deal with the second threat. But if we do it how the kata implies and we're doing it this way, this guy's got free rein. So keeping them in, buy myself some time because the threat is now coming in this direction. So we've dealt with this, we've bought ourselves some time. The transferable skill of Mio today. So as I turn, I'm using this as the block. This now can be a strike. Knuckles across the nose or the little dimple, the jinchu, vital point. To turn the head, so what isn't the second block is now a tetsui into the neck under the jaw. So by adding this transferable skill we've hopefully learnt in the Pinans and Seishan, radically changes how we can view the kata. We bought ourselves some time, we've cleared the attack, we've turned the head, strike. So by deciphering the kata a little differently and using our transferable skills, because when I was looking at it and doing the research, there are something like 8 or 9 blocks before you reach the first punch. If you're in a melee situation where it's gone chaotic and people are fighting everywhere, I don't think you're going to get away with doing 9 blocks without returning a strike. But some time, strike, strike. Now we come and deal with this guy. So just looking at the kata slightly differently. And again, we've mentioned in the past about whatever you think the opponent is, that's not what the kata's telling you. It's what it's telling you is where you need to be in relation to the kata, to the opponent. So the section with this is, it's not that the kick is coming and we're trying to take it. What it's telling us is the angle we need to be in relation to the opponent. So now, this isn't block, it's driving back, tetsui into the medulla plexus, into the back of the neck. So we're not defensive, we're attacking. We've changed our angle relative to the kick, giving something to think about into the medulla plexus. The kata then turns to this position. We covered this in Nai Hanshi. Take the head, strike. So instead of now having 8 or 9 blocks before they get the first strike, we've been striking, hitting, fighting all the time, getting techniques in. So it's just viewing the kata through slightly different eyes, and then it becomes like a melee fight, like a storming of the castle, rather than an infinite number of blocks with no response. Key point number 3, which I refer to as pretty versus practical. There's a big sort of online practical karate community. A lot of famous names, people like Ian Abernethy, Chris Hansen, myself, Simon and Sensei Roger. We went down to train with Chris Hansen, I think it was last year. Great day. And you see the practical karate guys, they take this stance with a cover, the shoulder covering the chin, and an arm, either crashing in with the shoulder, crashing in with the elbow. If you're in close and people are meleeing and just wailing punches, you can do a lot worse than getting in close behind the point of the elbow. But it doesn't look very much like what you would consider as karate. But again, it's one of these transferable skills. If we were going to take a photograph for the club's website, for example, or if we were in a karate kata competition and we hit a point similar to this, then you would want it to be as technically accurate and as clean as you can make it. So you would want to be sure you're into the 9 points of contact in your feet, you're not leaning out of balance. You would want to make sure you're not slouched, tenshi, heaven and earth. Have I pulled in with my internals? Have I got 90 degrees at the elbow? Have I got one fist width? Are my elbows not kicked out? Is the hikite good? So this is the pretty. If you're doing a karate competition, that's great, or a photograph for your website. But it doesn't take much to keep my engagement, 9 points of contact, so I've gone from pretty to practical, but everything else has remained the same. So the skills I learned to achieve this, I've now transferred to this. And this is going to be a lot more use to you in a melee fight than this. And you can unpack it even further from here. I've got no hanshi. So again, something you've learnt in one kata, you can adapt very slightly, make it into something that's more useful in a real world combat situation than standing there nice and pretty.